Just want to give you a heads up.
Okay.
I'm good. Why do we have this? Hi, Scott. No, why do we have all this?
No. You're done. Thank you.
It's always perilous to have
There you go.
several offers on a letter.
Yeah, it says the same. It says the same. I don't know why we were funny.
Good evening and welcome to the June 20, 2023 regular meeting of the Township Board for the Charter Township of Meridian. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk Jeffrey, could we have a roll call?
Supervisor Jackson?
Here.
Clerk Guthrie is here. Treasurer DeShane?
Here.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Here.
Trustee Sunland?
Here.
Trustee Wilson?
Here.
And Trustee Wazinski?
Here.
All board members are present.
Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is presentations, and the one listed on the agenda has been withdrawn. And to be presented at another time. And so we move on now to citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. I have 3 green cards. And I believe the first I got is from Mark Santucci. Santucci?
Yep.
Okay.
I can hear it up, you get the mic. Thanks. Mark Santucci, 5909 Blythefield Drive, East Lansing. Be short and sweet because I think I've said just about everything there is to say, but I just wanted to finish up by saying one thing. The 30 acres that I and my brother and cousin own, we intend to develop. Part of that is going to be a provisioning operation. And I want to make it very clear that we want to optimize the whole 30 acres, of which 7 or 8 are buildable, the other are wetland areas. I would not jeopardize that total area just for the sake of having a grow and provisioning area if I did not, number one, think it was important, and number two, have strong confidence that there will be no smell. Because if there is a smell, I, more than anyone, will be negatively affected by it. So I can assure you that that is, has always been front and center on my mind, because it's the value of the whole property I'm looking at, not the value of one little piece of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Second is Bob Baldori.
I guess you all know who I am by now, too. I'm here to again request that you include the option for one grow license in
Excuse
the
me, Mr.
Hagedorn.
Baldori, would you give us your address again, please?
I'm sorry.
Your address, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
2719 Mount Hope Road. I've been there for about 50 years, so I thought everybody knew that, too. As you know, that grow is approved for medical and further approved again by the Planning Commission for an adult use grow facility. We're asking that the smallest grow be placed in an indoor facility. It's a Class A grow, one that will be set up so that, as Mark said, no odors escape the building. As I've stated before, to this board previously, the building plan we've already submitted is a duplicate of a similar facility in Jackson that you've all been invited to tour at your convenience. There's an identical grow in that building, which is essentially a marketing tool. All the flower grown in the building is sold out of the same building. None of it is wholesaled to any other facility. It is sort of the local bar model that Mr. Santucci used in his other ventures, the Purple Carrot and the Red Haven. As anyone who visits will confirm, no odor escapes the building. In fact, I'm willing to state that if any of you come down and take the tour and detect odor escaping from that grow, we'll withdraw this request. It isn't a question of speculation. You can come down there and see for yourself. And of course, once you confirm that, I would expect there would be no objection to including that small Class A grow in the ordinance under consideration. This facility would be an asset to the community, as well as be consistent with the future land use map, if you look that up, and it would be a much better use for this parcel than any of the alternatives. There is absolutely no downside to the board, to the community, to anybody in helping this venture, and it's the only one that is being done by local businessmen of all these other facilities. So I respectfully request that you include that option in that overlay. And in addition to that, happy solstice.
Thank you. The third green card I have is David Pearson.
Here for the public hearing on Sierra Ridge.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the board at this time?
I can speak really quick.
If you could, come to the podium and give us your name and address, and later fill out a green card.
Yes.
They're right up there.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll do that right after this. I'm Marcus Baldori, lifelong resident of Meridian Township here on Mount Hope Road. I'm just here to echo the sentiments of the last two speakers. I have been very much a part of the operations in Jackson. I can confirm what Bob said about the odor invitation stands. I think it'd be interesting to take a look at for any of you, and just want to voice my continued support of this facility along with the grow, which I think would just add a lot to it from a consumer standpoint, and I don't see any downsides to it, frankly. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then we'll move on to item 6, Township Manager's Report. Mr. Frank Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor and Board. A few things to update you on tonight. Last meeting, we talked about the listening sessions. We're going to move forward with that, and we said we'd have something ready to go pretty quickly, and I want to thank our team for putting that together. I think it's well done, and it's ready to go, and we'll go out July 1 with the tax bills, and I think you all have a copy of that. And the board will be hosting, we're taking the Township Board on the road. We're going to be having 6 meetings, 2 in October, 2 in September, and 2 in November. So the first mailing on that will be going out. All the locations are away from the Township Hall and out into the neighborhoods. The local road program is continuing, and we're with a lot of success thanks to the oversight of Manager Opsimer and the team that we've assembled there. The most important, they're all important, but the most important is the redo of the chip and fog streets. And that is every comment we have received back, and it's hard to say every when you're talking about something, right? Every comment that we received back has been very positive. In fact, one today from a resident of Skyline. And the Maumee, Shawnee area has been completed. I believe the paving will occur tomorrow in Old English Estates. And for those of you who were at the meeting 3 months ago when we had the meeting with the residents, there were a number of residents from Old English Estates here. And if you further recall, they talked about a couple of areas that were needed to be worked on before we did the resurfacing, and we hired an engineering firm. They confirmed that. We have went in there and maneuvered through those areas and restored them so that we don't expect to have the dips when we do the resurfacing there. So that will occur tomorrow. The Roberts Rules training that also came out of this board, I think it was from Trustee Wazinski. That training is planned for the 27th and 28th of this month, next Tuesday and Wednesday. And we have 42 people signed up for that, 30 on Wednesday and 12 on Wednesday. So if you haven't signed up for that and you still wish to attend, please let us know. Celebrate Meridian coming up this weekend, big event. Friday night there will be a teen event, and Saturday will be an all-day event, marketplace, our campus here. Central Park Drive will be closed. Director Mason and her team have done an outstanding job of putting this together. The support of the police department and Chief Plaga. Expect lots of great things and a big crowd. As of right now, Chief Hamill has indicated today, as of right now, we will be having the fireworks as part of the show on Saturday night. Stay tuned because that could change. The Pride event is scheduled for August 26th. More on that later. The building renovation, as you can see, is coming along really well. We're ahead of schedule. The downstairs has had new carpet and painting has been completed, and now they're working on the entrance here, which has been a big improvement. Painters are working upstairs on the second floor. As soon as they're finished, the carpet people will come in and finish the carpet upstairs, and then the new office equipment will be here. We tentatively thought October 1 would be the date to move back in. Right now, everything goes as planned. We can move that up a month to September 1st. So that's the goal right now. We continue, we put in an application, an award for the Michigan Municipal League. We submitted our Meridian Cares program, and the deadline was last week, and we'll see where that goes. We continue our work with CATA. I don't need to tell all of you, tell anyone that we provide more public funding to a public transportation unit than any community in the state of Michigan. Our 3 mills plus the 0.6 mills plus the 0.2 mills for Ready Ride totals almost 4 mills, which is almost $8 million that this community gives to CATA. We are working with CATA. We have their attention. They're listening. They've been very great to work with, but we're working on getting that 0.2 mills taken off. And why should we pay for Ready Ride when we're giving them over $7.5 million before we pay for Ready Ride? So some conversations are going to take place. Supervisor is going to lead those discussions. She's putting a team together. We're going to meet with CATA and continue those discussions. But we don't feel our position as our residents should not have to pay that extra 2.2 mils, but we still should get the service for the amount of money that we pay. Woodward Way, it's been a long time coming. Affordable housing over by Whole Foods. Next week, we'll be breaking ground on that project, 49 units, I believe. The Freedom Fest, last week and this weekend, started out a week ago, Friday night, with The Wiz, showing of The Wiz at the historical village and then continued all weekend. I'm sure others will talk about it, but I just want to compliment everyone who was involved, and Director Amber Clark, who's not here this week, but I wish she were here to hear the praise for all the work that she put into that. I know there were a lot of people, but Amber had a lot to do with the leadership of that. Interim President Teresa Woodruff at MSU has accepted my invitation to be the keynote speaker at our state conference, Michigan Municipal Executives, MME. We have 355 members of that group, and we'll be meeting in Frankenmuth for a 2.5-day conference in July, and President Woodruff, interim president, I hope becomes President Woodruff, will be the keynote speaker for our state association. Police awards, last, I think it was Thursday night. It's a really great event. Honored, most importantly, it honored a lot of citizens, but also honored a lot of our officers. But I think there was something missing that night. And had I had the opportunity, this is what I would have said Thursday night. When you look at our police department and how they conduct themselves, which is exemplary, and you take a look at the life-saving awards that they have, which are exemplary, and the citizens' actions during 2023 and 2022, exemplary, and you look at our Office of the Year, Colby Cassidy, again, exemplary. There's something that didn't get mentioned Thursday night, and that is when you take a look at that team that's been assembled, and I can tell you, because out of the 36 that we have, I probably have signed off on 21 or 22 of them. That means it's a very young department, and the number may be a little higher than that. What's missing is the person who put all that together, because it's a really talented department. And I just want to recognize, we forget about recognizing people because we think people who are in leadership positions don't need to be praised. That's just what they do. And I don't believe that for a second. So I want to recognize Chief Plaga, who has put together through very difficult times while other police departments have failed in their hiring and to maintain a strong department. Not only do we maintain a strong department for Meridian Township, we still continue to serve our good neighbors to the east, Williamstown Township. So I want to really credit his work. And finally, the master plan update under the direction of Tim Schmidt continues. So that's my report, Madam Supervisor and Board, unless you have any questions.
Board members, you have questions, comments? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Walsh.
very much.
We now move to item 7, board member reports of activities and announcements. Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'll just add on to what Manager Walsh mentioned about the police awards ceremony last week. A lot of great folks being recognized for a lot of efforts that often go unrecognized. And it was really inspiring to hear the stories, especially relating to Officer Cassidy, who earned not one but 2 life-saving commendations over the last year for his efforts. And that also brought him to earn the Officer of the Year award. This seems as though with all the young folks that are involved in the police department, that we have a bright future for a long time to come.
Thank you. Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you, Supervisor. As we've discussed before, we have moved towards seeking out possibly a new banking partner in order to make sure our already considerable IT security infrastructure is as strong as possible. I have put out a request to local banks, regional banks, state banks for a request for proposals last week. It's been over 10 years since we went out there to look for that, and it's time we look to see what's out there. Things have changed a lot in 10 years, and we all know phishing in particular presents a real threat to every organization's network. We need to make sure that we're ready for the next attack or attempted attack. I'm thinking we're going to get 6 or 7, maybe 8 responses back. We'll have good choices to make. Summer tax bills are being mailed out next week, and they should arrive in our residents' mailboxes by July 1st. If you don't have it by July 8th, give us a call and we'll find out why not and mail you a new one. And lastly, I want to mention the 14th, I attended the Community Resources Fair, which our Economic Development Office, Amber Clark, co-sponsored with CATA. And we had about a dozen or more community organizations there to provide information for people who attended the Wednesday Farmers Market. And lastly, with many of the board members here, I attended the police award ceremony, and it was very moving. Particularly the 4 officers that received the Valor Award, which is the highest award we give. These officers walked into the fire. They walked into an unknown facility where there was an active shooter. They didn't turn back. They went in and they did the bravest thing possible. And we owe them all a great deal of thanks and gratitude for their courage and very professional work. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. Just an update on the last Environmental Commission, still working on Climate Sustainability Plan, which is an ever-changing document or ever-improving document. Working to look at the FY24 budget and looking to maybe either redirect or expand some other funding for some other initiatives outside of wetlands. Also attended the Lansing Pride celebration on Saturday, and it was excellently attended, given it was very hot outside. It was just very well run. Our very own Brian Shorkey had our Meridian Township tent up, so it was great to get some I guess, awareness that Meridian Township is a supporter, and he was actively getting participation in donations. So very excited about that. We have our next Pride meeting this Friday for our Meridian Township first annual Pride celebration. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
All right. Who else? Well, allow me to speak for the board and to thank Chief Platter for his leadership and the great force that he leads for Meridian Township. So we haven't had a chance to do that. I also attended some of the Freedom Fest events. Very interesting, very exciting, great music in many cases, and I got to meet a lot of new people. And so I encourage everyone to participate in these events and to get out and mingle with the public. Anything else? All right, then we'll move on to item 8, approval of our agenda. Treasurer DeShane.
I move for the agenda to be approved as presented.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wilson. Mr. DeShane, you have any comments? So all in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. The chair votes yes, and the motion passes. We then move to item 9, which is the consent agenda. As usual, the consent agenda consists of communications, minutes from our June 6, 2023 regular Township Board meeting, the manager's bills, ratification of a new full-time firefighter EMT appointment, and ratification of a new police officer appointments. Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move the consent agenda as presented this evening.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wazinski. I need a roll call vote. Clerk Guthrie?
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
And Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 10 is question for the attorney. I suspect, I know of no questions for the attorney at this time, but item 11 involves a hearing. We have a hearing tonight on Sierra Ridge final preliminary plat extension, and we will be led in this endeavor by Director Tim Schmidt. I open the hearing at this point.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So this project has a very long history that I've learned myself over my 2-year period here. So I briefly want to go through this for the board members that haven't been involved with this before. So typically, we would not hold a public hearing on something like this. This is typically a pro forma item. Township Attorney Brennan, who's here this evening to speak to this further, once we get to the actual action item, directed us to do so, given the litigation and history surrounding this project. So in the way back machine, the original approval for Sierra Ridge was on July 1st, 2003. So typically annually, right about June 1st, we get a request to extend biannually to extend the plat. And so on June 1st of 2003, we received a request from Mr. Jerry Fedewa to extend the preliminary plat for Sierra Ridge Estates. So starting in 2005, the board has subsequently extended the preliminary plat every 2 years, with the most recent one being in 2021. I believe it was my first board meeting, and I did not know what was going on yet. The plats phases then go through final plat. And so phase 1 was approved in 2005, phase 2 was approved in 2013, and phase 3 was approved in 2017. You may recall in early May, you approved phase 4 for final plat. Phase 4 has not been finally approved by all the other entities that have to approve it, so it's still in a bit of a limbo state. This is sort of the nature of subdivisions. They take a little bit of time on the administrative end because of all the agencies that are involved with them. And so that brings us to today, but I want to sidetrack just briefly to 2005. And my apologies, the 6th whereas in your resolution references 2007, it's actually 2005. My apologies. There was a bit of a conversation between the board at that time and the township attorney at that time regarding the connection to the property to the east. After some discussion, the board added a condition of approval, which has been continued since that time, that prior to the construction of Modesto Drive, the eastern cul-de-sac, the township board shall determine if a street connection should be provided to the property to the east of the plat. So at this point, where we're at, the western cul-de-sac has been built, and they are building houses on it. The only thing left to build is the eastern cul-de-sac. And in theory, they could request a pre-construction meeting to start that at any time now. And so that is why we are bringing this condition forward for the board to discuss at this time.
Just one question.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're now talking about phase 4 only.
So we are talking about the final preliminary plat for the entire project.
Okay,
All that's left is phase 4 and 5.
4 and 5.
Because 1, 2, and 3 have gone through final plat approval and they're essentially fully built, fully encumbered.
Okay,
So we're really just talking about 4 and 5, the last pieces.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
And so we're at the point now where we believe, and Township Attorney Brennan, I believe, will speak to this further once we get to the action item after the public hearing, that it is time for the board to make a decision on this condition that's been hanging out there. And so at this time, the staff and the Township Attorney would recommend that the connection point be provided to the property to the east. And what specifically we would recommend is the second condition in the resolution, which is the developer shall provide substreet access to the eastern adjoining property, parcel ID number as listed, in a location to be determined by the developer and approved by the Director of Community Planning and Development. I do not know at this time where the best location for that is. I know that there has been extensive study on the developer side, and the neighboring property owner side as to where they think it might go, but I don't want to put the board in a position to have to say that's exactly where it needs to go right now, because we may get into this a little bit and decide there's a better location. And so that's what we would recommend at this time. It is a public hearing, so I'll stop talking now and let the public speak, and then we can have further conversation when we get to the action item, if that's acceptable.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. So at this time, are there members of the public that would like to speak to this issue in the public hearing?
Did you have a green card for the public hearing?
Oh, I did. Mr. Pearson, I did have a green card.
Sorry, David Pearson on behalf of iDevelopment, the Ide family. I thought it was a matter of protocol that the applicant spoke first, which is why I was waiting. I don't know if you have a order of events.
Maybe I should, that is a.
Since the applicant's requesting the extension, typically I would defer.
You're exactly correct. Then Mr. Federer, I believe, represents the applicant. In this case, would you please come to the board and speak to this issue?
Good evening, board members. My name is Jerry Fidois. I reside at 5570 Okemos Road and 6099 Lake Drive, which we just moved in the last week or two, and I'm just starting to get accustomed to the new spot. But in any case, we had started this process in 2003. And we had looked at the land. It's a beautiful, beautiful parcel. And the best part of this whole development is all the way on Modesto Drive. Is absolutely stunning and beautiful. And we have been working for the last, 20 years through the development process. And so here we are. We find ourselves in the position after we've spent $300,000 for a lift station, $300,000 for a boardwalk, 2 lots, which are about $200,000 for a polishing pond, and the $250,000 to pave Newton Road. Okay, we've spent that money. Okay, to develop this. Now we're to our final phase where this is finally, it's paid off and we get to the benefit of being able to enjoy the fruits of our 20 years of labor. And the thing about this Modesto Lane is the homes in there are absolutely beautiful. And part of our desire is to not allow the little ticky-tacky houses that will be developed on these small lots that'll be available once that the folks to the east come to the realization, which they haven't spent any money to figure out, the cost that it will take and the number of lots. So they haven't gone through the drain office to understand that most of their lots actually back up to wetlands. And each lot that does back up to wetlands, that developed lot has to have a swale that picks up the water, the drainage water from the backyard into the swale. So they're saying that they think that they have 55 lots, and I'm saying they probably got 20 to 25 lots after the drain department requires them to build these swales through the backside of all these lots that back up to the wetland. And so it's kind of like, I feel kind of like if you've ever been in a long line for a theater or something like that, and you see that somebody comes up and cuts in line, this is exactly what the Ides are doing. This is exactly what they're doing. They're climbing on the backs of somebody else to provide them water, sewer, gas, and electric. They have 3 other outlets, 3 other locations to be able to access. That's why we're in litigation. There's 3 other locations for them to access, but they want to access our Sierra Ridge. Well, why? Well, it's a beautiful subdivision, and it's right there. Water, sewer, gas, and electric delivered to your doorstep. How could you not like that? why not work through these other 3 accesses? But they've waited, and they've waited, and they've waited, and they've waited for us to provide it to them for free. And I object. And we're currently involved in a lawsuit with them. And if we win the lawsuit, we will countersue for a couple $100,000 if that we prevail, because the law says that they need to provide a location if they don't have one. They've got locations. So basically, here we are in the development process, and we adamantly oppose this connection. And you will see, hopefully, somewhere that you have seen where that they have accesses. I didn't know that we're going to have a public hearing. I thought it was a vote. So I would have prepared and had the maps for you to see. There are the 3 locations where they have actual access to roads that they own. But why are they not doing that? That's a question for them. They're going to say, well, that's not a very good access. Well, it is a legal access for them to do that. And what I would like to do today, you're going to hear from their attorney and maybe others, but I'm going to say this. I would like an opportunity to come back to you tonight to refute their supposed claims. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think now I need to hear from Mr. Pearson as a member of the public.
Well, actually, I'm here representing the Ide family and Ide development. My address, by the way, is 1142 South Washington. And we, I should also mention Mark Klaus, who's the general counsel and CFO for Ide development, is here as well. I think it was 2003, but it might have been before then when Mark and I came here and in this room asked that the approval of the preliminary plat for Sierra Ridge Estates include access to the property to the east on the northern extremity as well as on the south. It was in fact provided on the south. We have come back every 2 years and made the exact same request. We did not hide in the woods and sneak out and yell boo in 2021. We have been here asking over and over and over again. And the basis for that request is very straightforward. It's state law. Feedawa builders are developers. This is not the Feedawa's backyard. This is development land that they purchased in order to develop. They set out to develop 99 lots. They are on the last dozen of those lots. Nothing that we've said in the litigation was a surprise in any fashion because we've come and presented that information over and over again. State law and your ordinances, as well as your development regulations, are there to ensure that development is coordinated, that it's not isolated, that individual properties are not simply built out in cul-de-sacs, cut off from everything else, where, yes, it is a way to develop something which people want, and it does draw high prices. There's no question about that. But it's also been the case since 1967 that the state statute for subdivisions has provided that when you develop a subdivision, you must provide access to adjoining property, and you have to provide suitable access. The township subdivision ordinance calls for continuity of roads. The reasons are fairly obvious from the community standpoint. You want a community. Developers understand that this is an expense. The Ide family has built subdivisions since the early 1980s, and they're familiar with the costs that Mr. Feedawa speaks of, having spent similar sums on utilities, on roads, on stormwater collection. They do all of those things when they do development, and they do it because you, the Drain Commissioner, the State Subdivision Control Office, County Road Commission, which has requirements for continuity of roads, make sure that what's being built is not simply for the profit of the developer, but is built for a community. And that's why through the years, developers come in and they try to avoid stub streets because they take away cul-de-sacs, and cul-de-sacs are nice places to sell. They generally back up to something which would otherwise be connected to future development. What the township does is ensure that it's not just there for the benefit of the developer to sell the lots and move on to the next, but rather when each developer comes in to build the roads, to build the utilities in order to make that connection. In 2003, when the first phase of Sierra Ridge was built, it connected to the east to a property that is part of a parcel owned by the Ide family that was developed as Lake Lansing Estates. The Ide family has been in the position themselves over the years of building any number of stub streets and connections that go on to the next development that is owned by the next developer. It's expensive, but it's part of the process. The public services, the emergency services, and the community connections are what drive how those improvements are made. It is an expense, and it does deprive developers of profitable cul-de-sacs. There's no question about that. But that connection was made back in 2003 on this very development, and you and your predecessors had heard from us many, many times, and in fact in 2007 said, we will decide that before that final cul-de-sac is built. We'll decide what that connection here, and that's why we're here tonight. The reason we're in litigation was we understood in 2021 that Friedewald Builders was bringing in a final plat for that final phase, and once a final plat is approved, they can sell lots. They can build the road, and then the connection can never happen. You're not in a position to make any change, and that's why we were in a position of having to start the litigation. We've been at it for 2 years. It's one of the reasons why you have that large pack of paper from me, thanks to Mr. Friedewald's attorneys and your attorneys. We went to 2 separate engineering firms, Mannix Smith Group and Bergman, and said, how do we get access? What other means do we have access? The reports that you have, and they're summarized in my summary, but I'll give you the quick view, is the biggest issue is the Ide property has only 2 upland areas. The one to the south was developed as Lake Lansing Estates. That is south of the Costigan Drain, which is a large open drain. This is north of the Costigan Drain. When you look at the Ide property, if you look at it as a wetland map, which I've attached with the various exhibits, there's a lot of wetlands. In terms of developable area, there's about 26 acres. And so the question was, how do you get there from here? Back in 2003, there were adjoining properties to the north which might have given a route out, but to be honest, you got there first. That's Towner Road Park and the Township Preserve to the east of it. Consumers Energy got there first, after that property was bought, and put in a cell tower with large stationary anchors, which mean there's no way to put any sort of access through there. The other issue is you have to have a wetland use permit from the township and one from the state as well. And that's very limited. And what the state looks for is the least disturbance to wetlands. And so Bergman Associates, in looking at this, took a look at what would the state actually permit. They didn't make actual applications. You can't do 6 applications and say to the state, which one do you like? Frankly, because the expense of the application is so large, but because they won't review it. They want you to tell them what's the right access. Based on 20-plus years of experience, Bergman said, this is Paul Furtaud Bergman said, the state will not and the township won't permit a full-size road going south to Lake Lansing, the existing Lake Lansing Estates across the Costigan Drain. In addition, that's going to cost you about $895,000 if it could be permitted, but in his opinion, it can't be permitted. He's been deposed, he's been open to questions from your attorney, from Mr. Fedewa's attorneys, and there hasn't been any evidence to show that somehow that could be done, that it would be permitted, or that it wouldn't cost $900,000 to do that. There's a possible alternative to the north, which takes in much less wetland, but that goes across the township's property, and the township has no obligation to permit that. It has both a preserve there and it has a park. Those are the other possibilities that might be permitted, but won't, because at best, they might be permitted for secondary access. And the reason I bring that up is you could get access, but what you can build is a fire road. That's it. You can get, it's about 22 feet wide, I believe, under the International Fire Code. It has no utilities, so it has not nearly the same base or support. You don't have to build it to Road Commission standards, and you don't have to dedicate it to the Road Commission. So those don't represent any real access here at all. The only possible access that the engineers found was feasible was to Sierra Ridge. That's why we've been asking all along, because if you look at the wetland maps, that is the place where you have a very, very narrow slip of wetland, if any, between the two parcels. And it was already under development. And that's why we've been coming back every 2 years and asking the board, and the board, in essence, has said, we'll wait until we get it. That's where we are now. The state statute does not require that the property be totally isolated. I mean, it isn't that you just can't walk on it, it's that you can't actually build to get there. It does not require that any possible access be permitted. It requires suitable access. Judge Dragonchuck has already found that the township, first of all, does have the power, as does she, to determine what's suitable. The township has been in fact, it's the only reported case on this, you may already know it, Altman v. Meridian Township, where the township required a developer to provide suitable access. The developer said, well, you know, you can go this way and it ought to be good enough. And the township determined that in terms of full access with a public road, although it wasn't the way the developer wanted to do it, he had to bear the extra expense of making that connection in order to build his development. And the Michigan Supreme Court overturned the Court of Appeals and upheld the township in requiring that suitable access. We think that the evidence that's been presented, which your attorney has reviewed, which your planning director has reviewed, compels the conclusion that there really is only one suitable access here, and that is through Sierra Ridge. That is the point which the board really is in a position to have to decide. Your township engineer, I should mention, in approving the utilities for Sierra Ridge, has already required that the sanitary sewer be built at a depth that it can provide the sanitary sewer service to the east for where that connection would be. That follows your township engineering and public works rules. Another set of regulations that requires that you build for community, not just for yourself. For those reasons, we think that the state law, and frankly your law as well, requires this connection. And we would ask that you adopt the resolution that's before you as proposed by your planning director and your attorney, and approve the extension of the plat conditioned upon that connection. I'd be glad to answer questions. Mr. Klaus also knows the property and the history well. If you have other questions, we'd be glad to follow up as you think necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Klaus? Do you have comments there?
Good evening. I don't have any planned comments at all. I was simply here to answer any questions. As Trustee Wilson and I spoke a few minutes ago, I I've been here those whole 20 years and then probably about 20 before that. And we did attend most every meeting, or we sent letters in to remind the Township Board of the connection being necessary for this. And as David pointed out previously, throughout the subdivisions that we built during my tenure at the company, we have built stub streets on most every single one of those, from Georgetown to the Shoals to Sundance and Sunwind. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a few at this point, but the stub street issue and connecting subdivisions from one to the other has been the township's position and goals throughout the time that I've had the pleasure of working with the township. And the idea of having connectivity between our neighborhoods and not precluding them from going from one to the other, and not putting traffic back out onto the main roads and zipping back and forth and in and out, I think is an important factor and has always been part of the township's plan. I'm disappointed to hear that Mr. Fedewa feels differently. It's certainly not a surprise. It's something that we have voiced, as I said, for over 20 years. So we appreciate you taking the time this evening. I'm glad it works this way, quite honestly, rather than continuing in front of Judge Drakenchuk. I know we've not been happy about the cost of having to do that, and I'm sure Mr. Fedewa feels the same way. So we look forward to hearing your decision. Thank you. And I'll be here if you have any other questions.
Thank you. Mr. DeShane.
Mr. Klaus, I do have a question. Obviously, you've been here before, you know the board, we haven't.
Yeah, we should probably wait till our
We don't
action
do
item.
questions during the public hearing.
Okay, well, I'll say that for the action item that comes up next on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, save my question for that, thank you.
Is there anyone who else?
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this subject at this time? Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. Thank you. Les, do you have anything to say, Craig? Would you like to? I'm not here to tell you not to approve the last phase of the development. That's not what we're here for. I guess is that I would say that I'm surprised that we didn't get any information on the resolution that's before you. Everybody else has got information on the resolution, but we did not receive that. So just so you know that. So I may have brought my attorney to also speak to this item, because he deposed the engineer involved in this, and the engineer was basically, he was charged, or he was hired for the reason to back up their case. That's what what the engineer was hired to do. So we're not really surprised that they conclude that that's really the only way to access the property, because he's paid by the IDES to find that answer. So he worked and worked and worked to find that, and then he was deposed, and he also said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, there are other angles and avenues for them to connect to, okay? So for that, it was implied that Eagle or DQ would say that that is the only alternative, reasonable alternative. It is not. It is not the only reasonable alternative. And they never applied through Eagle or DQ, whoever you're talking about, and they never spent any money to find out where exactly the wetlands were and where the floodplain is. But there's a substantial floodplain, and there's a substantial wetland to cross to get to their land, okay? Substantial. Now, in working and deposing their engineer, he said, yeah, well, there are other avenues to connect. There are other avenues. And, you know, unfortunately, that you're kind of here like a jury trying to decide this, and I didn't realize that I would be in this circumstance. But I just want to say, we want to move ahead, but we think that it is a grab because there's alternatives. And David has got, can David show you just the screen of the angles? And you may have seen this.
Can you do it from here?
Hook up from there.
Do you have a HDMI cable?
At the podium.
It's actually going to need to be.
Or
At
it's
the
right here,
podium.
HDMI, just happens to be two of them. Which one is it? Either one.
That side.
Are you speaking now during the public, are you done speaking during the public hearing? And are you now speaking during the public hearing for the record?
Oh,
Or are you just assisting with the map?
He-
I'm
I
assisting.
mean, I'm trying to keep minutes here, so. I'm
Okay,
just,
I think
you know.
he's just trying to get the map displayed.
Plugged in.
Tim, have you actually tried using the plugin since it was installed?
Maybe,
Try the other one.
we'll be quick,
It's a
sorry.
new piece of
Thank
IT
you for your
equipment that we
patience.
just installed, so I did not get a rundown on
I
it.
think that you might need to just
I can walk it over.
walk it over.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
And you may have seen this, you may have not have seen this, but it's basically showing all the alternatives. You got to outline their location.
So this
We have this map right here.
yes. Okay.
What page is that?
It's under tab 1, you'll see a wetlands map.
Okay.
It's very helpful.
This is an access point here. They do have to cross a bit of township land to look into the end of Wilder, right here, but this is all property. All the way out to, this is Marsh Road. And so then they have connection points all the way through, down to here, here, and here.
Because you're crossing wetland.
Oh, I know what that is.
We've sent this to you before.
No, the township put it together. It's not that map at all, because
I
that
mentioned that's good.
Shows you more on one conversation.
that's
I get it.
Okay, I think we've lost control of the order of this hearing. So can you refer us in our packet to the map that you're showing?
No, because this is their packet, and this is a document that we've produced.
Okay, and so there's no way for you to show
It doesn't
your
work.
map to all of us?
I don't
at
think
the same
technology is
time.
allowing us to do that.
Okay, then we probably should not engage in.
Is
We can tell you, we can show you where it's at, that sort of thing, you can look it up.
Okay,
And may I continue? I would just like to say, we would like to proceed and have this approved, and we're not developing the next phase where this occurs right away, this Modesto Lane. We're not going there. So, we say that, approve it with all the conditions that is on there, unless there's new conditions on the plat. And I haven't seen that. Are there new conditions for this plat?
my understanding is that there are no new conditions.
Okay, we've been through this,
For
and
the township.
they've been approved it, and we're not building the street where they want to connect to for a while. So I'm saying, let's move ahead and approve it and end the public hearing and leave things the way they are, and we'll, deal with it in a couple of years or whenever it is. And that's what I say.
Okay,
And if anybody has any questions for me, I'm available for questions as well.
okay.
Thank you.
Could I have Mr. Schmidt come back to the podium? So I have a question for Mr. Schmidt. We are not here to work out the location of a stub. We are merely here to consider the extension of the preliminary plat so that development can proceed to the level of a final plat under the condition that that final plat include a connection to the east.
I think this is the point where I defer to our township attorney.
If you would, sir.
Shouldn't this be part of the action?
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Usually during a public hearing, we hear from the public and get their comments.
I'm John Brennan, Township Attorney.
Questions.
Brennan.
I'm happy to, at this point, speak with regard to things, and then when you get to the action item, if you want to ask me questions, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I understand what you're concerned about, Madam Clerk.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
So, firstly, what you're here to decide on this renewal of this preliminary plat is the whole preliminary plat. And as Mr. Smith said, Director Smith said that the history here, there has been a condition that's been carried on every 2 years since 2005 regarding this stub or no stub issue, correct?
Right.
Now, it was originally approved in 2003 simply as a cul-de-sac. I don't know why there was not a stub considered, or whether a stub was considered, or whether there was any debate about it. I don't know why it was approved without a stub in 2003, but it was. With no connection to that north side to the property to the east. And then at the very first renewal, and the minutes are in your packet, I'm sure you read it, you saw that your township attorney at the time basically said you should kick the can. It was great for her, not so much for me, because as the can got kicked every 2 years and this problem never got resolved, now we're here in 2003 at the cusp of trying to finish the project, and that issue has never been resolved, all right? You're not being asked to determine where a connection, but simply whether a connection to the property to the east should be done, and that should be, if you approve that, that would be left up to the applicant and the township staff. Okay, so that's that part. With regard to the statements that have been made here today, I not surprisingly, I disagree to a degree with both representations that have been made. The Ides brought this lawsuit, and the township is a defendant in the lawsuit. And at the time the lawsuit was brought, per the allegations of the complaint, we were laboring under the impression that the preliminary plat had been approved as it was in 2003 with no conditions. And so we set out to defend the township on the basis that it made that decision. The reason we're here today is because we now discovered that condition, we dig back in the discovery and documents come up from 10 years ago, and all of a sudden you realize, well, wait a minute. Okay. And that's why we're here today. In the litigation, as you heard, the Ides have taken the position that their property is landlocked. In the Land Division Act, before it requires that there be suitable access given, there must be a finding that the property in question is landlocked. It's in the statute. We took the position that the Ide property in litigation was not landlocked, because although there were difficult options, and you've heard about those, drains, wetlands, et cetera, there were difficult options, but there was access to public access road. Judge Dragonchuk disagreed with us. She said that, in our view, that you can be economically landlocked. In other words, those options are too expensive, and so they're entitled to, possibly anyway, we're going to go to trial on it if we do, to show that they are in fact economically landlocked, and this is the only possible. Right, so that's why we couldn't get rid of the case right away. Okay, we disagree with that. We could appeal that if we ever went that far, but so we disagree with the idea that you have to do this as a matter of law. Okay, but our recommendation is that you should approve it, and I'll explain why. All right, so it is true that while there are these other accesses around, we do have this litigation. It is pending. It's stayed right now pending whatever happens here. If the township board makes a decision that there must be a stub access point, the basis for their litigation will dry up. It will have to be dismissed. We view that as a plus for the township to avoid the litigation. That's one reason we are recommending it. The second reason we're recommending it is that your ordinance does provide for this continuity of roads. It's very clear. It was highlighted to you by Mr. Schmidt in your packet. Why that wasn't considered back in 2003, I can't answer. But it still is true nevertheless today. Okay? So that's something that bears consideration. Now, how is this property going to be developed? You've heard, is it going to be 20 lots? Is it going to be 50 lots? You talked about all this other access. The fact right now, as that property sits there today, and nobody really disagrees with it, if a stub is provided, the property to the east can only develop 6 lots because of the fire code. You heard a reference to the International Fire Code. Need at least a second access, and he is correct, Mr. Pearson is correct, that second access can be a secondary access. That is not a primary access where cars can go up and down, but enough to get emergency vehicles in, okay? So we know they need 2 access points to develop more than 6 lots. We know that. Where are they going to get it from? It's not the board's problem. It's the property developer's problem. And if they get that secondary access, they can then develop up to 35 lots. At which point, our ordinance says that you need 2 access points, and it is not very specific, but our interpretation is you need 2 primary access points to service 50 lots. But there is a waiver provision in the ordinance, which they could apply for. Again, we're not here today to discuss that, but the board ought to know that in terms of, is it valuable to give this access? Does it make sense to give this access? It is theoretically developable for those 50 lots. Whether it will or not, who knows? It's at least developable as to 6 lots. Getting access through Towner Park is going to require involvement with the township's park board commission, the Park Commission Board. Whether they'll permit that or not, again, we're not here to decide that. It's a possibility. We also don't know, although they have an opinion, we don't know that Eagle will say you can't make an access across the wetlands, and we don't know whether Commissioner Lindeman is going to make it difficult or less difficult for them to deal with I have my suspicions, but to deal with the drain, right? All things are possible. We don't know. We can talk in terms of probability, but so I think those are relevant considerations. I hope anyway the board sees that those are relevant considerations for whether or not to approve this, subject to a stub being placed rather than the cul-de-sac as it currently exists. I believe that it would be the most prudent thing for this board to approve the stub access, both in terms of resolving the litigation problem, but also in terms of being consistent with its ordinance and leaving the developer to their wares in terms of whether or not they can fully develop the property. That's my recommendation to the board. So I'll sit down, and when we get to the action item, if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Would you give us your name and address?
John Brennan, and I'm at 4151 Okemos Road, Fahey Schultz, Berzik Roads.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, are there other members of the public who would like to speak to this issue?
Then we'll close the hearings.
We'll close our hearing at 7:08 p.m. And move then to our action items. Where item 12A is the Sierra Ridge Final Preliminary Plat Extension. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Supervisor. Planning Commissioner Boyd Hart. So just to reiterate, the position that the township attorney and staff have reached at this point, we believe now is the appropriate time to resolve this hanging Chad question from 2007 and, potentially resolve the litigation from the township's perspective.
Okay.
This is the the prudent thing for us to do. So we would recommend approval of the resolution in your packet, extending the preliminary plat approval for Sierra Ridge Estates to July 21, 25, subject to the connection point meeting local ordinance and land division act requirements being provided to the property to the east. And then again, on the resolution, the sixth whereas should actually be 2007, not 2005. Again, my apologies. All the odd numbers tied me up. I'd be happy to answer any questions within my limited purview here, and Mr. Brennan obviously is available for the far more expansive questions that you may have.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to adopt the resolution extending preliminary plat approval for Sierra Ridge Estates to July 1, 2025, subject to a connection point meeting local ordinance and land division act requirements being provided to the property to the east, with the following amendment in the sixth whereas, updating 2005 to 2007.
Support.
It's been moved and supported by trustee Hendrickson and clerk Guthrie. Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I appreciate the healthy debate and discussion that's been had this evening in regard to this issue from apparently all three legs of the litigation teams. I believe, and I appreciate also the context about, what impact this will likely have on any pending litigation. However, I don't believe that we should be taking action based on how litigation will fall on this. With that being said, reviewing the information that was provided to us in this packet and considering our local ordinances, I do think we should move forward with this condition that requires the stub access to the property to the east. If you take a look at the map that was provided, I absolutely see, the various possible outlets to this property, but none is, I would consider the property to the west, the small connection, the short connection, to be likeliest and most suitable entry point into this area. And the Ide family will determine over time, I'm sure, how to get secondary access, whether that's with Fire Road or any other means. But the question before us is, should we require the provision of this stub? I believe that we should.
Clerk Guthrie.
I don't have anything further to add on top of what trustee Hendrickson has already stated, unless I see that there's something opposite or opposing that I should add later on in this conversation.
Okay. Mr. Duchesne.
I too intend to support this extension. I do have a question for Mr. Fidoa, if you'd come to the podium. It sounds like you agree that you're not contesting the extension of this before the board of the plat.
Well, I'm kind of like in a spot, okay? Because the reason is that we have like 4 houses under construction in phase 4, and we don't want to jeopardize that extension or approval. And so to answer your question, I guess not.
Okay. While you're at the podium, you do understand the need to have neighborhoods connected to each other?
Oh, very much so.
Okay.
Very much so.
And your issue with the Ides is that you've developed infrastructure in your current plats, current neighborhoods that they're going to be using by having it as a road in and out of their neighborhood. Is that correct?
Well, that's part of it. That is part of it.
Have some of your neighborhoods benefited from connections to other neighborhoods that were already developed before you?
You mean that just the Ides have been from that
No,
neighborhood?
In general, have you developed new plots where you had used existing neighborhoods that your plot connected through?
No, never have.
Have you attempted to mediate this at all before this went to?
We've been to mediation twice.
Okay.
And through quite a bit of cash, and there has been the first mediation, we drove to Grand Rapids to mediate, and we got into the room to mediate, and a proposal was presented, and we were told that they were not in a position to negotiate or mediate. So, I mean, I don't know why you would go to mediation and spend the half a day, and you're told that they're not in a position to negotiate. And secondly, we had a second mediation that we were pursuing and threw out some numbers to buy. And we had come to the discovery that in dealing with the new rules with the drain office, that the parcel that they own is going, they haven't engineered it, so they don't really know, but they will find out that is very limited on what they can do because of these required swales that are 30-foot wide swales, or easement for a swale in the back of the lot that's required behind every lot that backs up to a wetland. I don't know if you have that plat that you can see their plat, but if you look at their plat, it is surrounded by wetland. More than half of the lots are deemed to be backing up to wetlands, and which requires these 30-foot easements, at least 20-foot out of the buffer zone, the wetland buffer zone. So you have a 120-foot deep lot that has wetland behind it. Well, first of all, you have to be 20 foot outside of that, and then you're another 30 foot. Well, you've got a 25-foot setback, and you got yourself a trailer in sideways to make it anything buildable. I mean, it just really, and I've suggested to their attorney or to them, or our attorney, that they tell them that this development that they're proposing and access that it's costing is not as valuable as they think that it is. And I would just say, just go through the exercise and find out what you can really do with it, because there's not a whole lot that you can do with it. And we'd hate to be in the position to offer and install that access and have it never be used. And if it would be used, it probably, with their objective, if they got their approval on this, their first thing that they're going to do, they're going to turn around and put it on the market, because they're not going to develop it themselves. They're going to sell it. They bought it in a tax sale years ago. They bought it in a tax sale for pennies on the dollar, and now they're holding out to get premium money for it. And they're going to find out it's probably not worth as much as they think that it is. So.
Thank you. You've answered my question.
Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Brennan for clarifying this rather difficult situation, and I will be supporting the motion.
Trustee Wisniewski.
I think Manager Walsh would like to comment.
Thank you, if I may.
Mr. Walsh, yeah.
Just a suggestion. This has been a very deep hole that's been dug here on this issue. There's been a lot of money spent on this issue. And I think just a recommendation, any further line of questioning of anyone else is just not going to help the situation. I would ask that the board just thumbs up or thumbs down to what's before you. I don't think it would behoove any of us for the future to continue the dialogue this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Board members. Trustee Wisniewski.
I also thank you, Mr. Brennan. It was helpful, and I'd attorney as well. Given the cost of litigation and the importance of connectivity, again, with the Land Division Act and our ordinance, I'm ready to support this particular resolution.
All right. Any further comments, board members? Okay. I would just add that what I see before me is a resolution to permit extending the preliminary plat approval for Sierra Ridge to July 1, 2025, subject to a connection. No specificity about where that connection is, subject to a connection point meeting local ordinance and Land Division Act requirements. Shall we have a roll call vote?
Yes.
Just Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you. Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you all. Mrs. Smith?
Just waiting for the next item.
Oh, okay.
Madam Supervisor, can I
Yes.
request a 5-minute recess since we're probably going to get into a pretty meaty topic next?
Yes, we can take a 5-minute recess.
So I think the
Okemos School millage bond. Stuff like that, you know, for
That's what woke means. That's what woke means. Being aware of those kinds of things.
yeah, kind of a big deal. That's what we used for the $275 million bond campaign.
Yeah, you don't want to pass a $270 million bond and then lose the domain for $10.
Seriously, right, exactly. Seriously. Okay, let's go.
Okay, let's go.
All right. 7:28.
We now that everyone has returned, move to item 12B on our agenda. Mr. Schmidt is still standing patiently waiting for us. Item 12B is ordinance 2022-19, marijuana zoning ordinance updates, introduction.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
Supervisor.
Schmidt.
So this is the first of three pieces to resolve the discussion that we've been having in the township over about the last 8 months.
Okay.
So this is the piece that was referred to the Planning Commission and brought back with a recommendation. What it would do is it would change the zoning ordinance only to modify the language that currently is specific to medical. And so what it would do is it would modify the language to be broad for any type of marijuana establishment, prohibiting all businesses except for retail sales. So in recreational case, it's a marijuana retailer. For the medical side, it's a provisioning center. And would allow for drive-through and contactless based on the conversation that the township board had, and would remove 2 of the areas from the overlay map that permit marijuana businesses. That's the Dawn Avenue District and the Town Road District. So those are the changes that are in this specific ordinance. Staff, this one hasn't changed much, frankly, since the Planning Commission made their recommendation. And so at this time, staff would recommend approval to introduce this ordinance. If it's introduced, we will publish it as per law and bring it back for adoption at the next meeting. If there are any changes, we will take a step back, make those changes, bring it back for further introduction. That is all I have about this one, but happy to answer any questions.
All right. Is there someone prepared to Mr. Hendrickson?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to approve excuse me, let me start again. I move to adopt the resolution approving for introduction zoning amendment 2022-19, an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township of Meridian to update the standards for marijuana-related businesses in the township and reduce the areas in which they are permitted.
Support. Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So as Director Schmidt indicated, this is the product of, well, probably years of work on this topic, including but not limited to a ballot initiative put in front of the people of Meridian Township. This is the first portion. This is one of 3 that we'll be seeing tonight. And I believe that the extensive discussions that we've had on this topic over the last many months have brought us to a proposal that we can all agree to. I think that there is value in providing a unified front on this issue, one that the people did speak on August of last year. So with that said, I'll be supporting the resolution here to update our zoning ordinance to reduce the number of overlay areas where marijuana will be permitted from 7 down to 5, and allow for the various other ancillary pieces of the marijuana business to move forward.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I do concur with the remarks made by Mr. Henderson, and we are indeed following the will of the people, that they do want recreational marijuana available at stores, at retail shops in the community, and we are taking this first step of changing the zoning ordinance so that we will be able to do that. Thank you.
Mr. DeShane.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I too will be supporting this. I believe it's important for the board to speak with one voice. The public has spoken. It was a very narrow vote, but a slim majority did express its support for recreational marijuana. So the board has worked with this for the past 8 months. The previous board, which 3 of us were on, worked on the provisioning or medical marijuana for 2 whole years before we approved anything. This will be a change from that last stance the board took in September of 2019 when the vote was 7-0 not to allow recreational marijuana. As we recall, we were hoping to get experience from the medical marijuana before we proceeded further. That didn't happen. Nonetheless, 4 years later, I believe it's time to move forward with a unified vote by the board. For those reasons, I will support it as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? So the motion is to adopt the resolution approving for introduction the zoning amendment to amend the zoning ordinance to update the standards for marijuana-related businesses in the township and reduce the areas in which they are permitted. Do I need a roll call vote? Clerk Guthrie, could we have a roll call vote?
Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Yes.
Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson.
Yes.
And the clerk votes yes. Motion carries 7-0.
All right. Thank you. Item 12C, ordinance 2023-02, recreational marijuana licensing. Introduction. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So this is the second piece of the package in front of you this evening. As we've discussed with Township Attorney Kushel multiple times in the board, because recreational marijuana is approved under one law and medical is approved under one law, they are separate from a licensing perspective. And so this is the licensing piece for the recreational side. It would repeal the current prohibition in the ordinance against recreational marijuana uses and establish a licensing process that we've discussed at length with the board previously. The 3 things I want to highlight this evening that are changes to this ordinance at the board's request are the inclusion of a detailed definition for undue hardship. Again, we expect there will be additional criteria in the procedures and standards and the scoring system that come next, but this is the first step that our attorneys are recommending. There's some minor typographical changes to be consistent, and the discussion that was brought up at the last meeting about potentially conflicting language regarding the limited contact drive-through delivery in various sections. In one section, it appeared to read that they were not permitted, whereas in another section it did. We've clarified that language to be clear that that board's intent was to allow it. Those are the only changes from the last meeting, and therefore at this time we would recommend approval of the introduction for the recreational licensing piece. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to adopt the resolution approving for introduction text amendment 2023-02, an ordinance amending the code of the Charter Township of Meridian, Ingham County to rename Chapter 40, repeal Article 3 or Chapter 40, and adding Article 4 to Chapter 40, which authorizes and permits recreational marijuana establishments.
Support.
Supported by trustee Hendrickson. Trustee Wazinski.
Madam Supervisor, I really don't have anything more to add than what Director Schmidt said. We've talked about it in length. I think this is a good plan, and I'm ready to support.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. The only thing I would add to what I mentioned in the previous agenda item is to appreciate the work that was done by both of our staff, the members of this board, and our township attorneys who have certainly put in many long hours in addition to the work that we see here in our board meetings. So much appreciated to township staff and to the township attorney for very good work on daunting ordinance to draft.
Other board members. Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I only have one question for Director Schmidt. Is marijuana with an H or with a J? Does it change based off of recreational and medical? Because I feel like I've seen it used for both
So,
interchangeably somehow.
they're functionally interchangeable at this point.
Will there be consistency? In
About
the
3 years ago, I believe, the state marijuana agency, whose name I'm blanking on right now, I apologize, dropped the H and went to a J as more of a going forward. Reference in the law is still the H, so
Okay.
what you see is if the township attorney wrote it, it's probably an H. If I wrote it, it's probably a J. 'Cause I'm more on the licensing side, he's more on the law side.
So neither one is conflicting or?
They don't conflict.
Okay, I want to make sure before I vote. All right.
Treasurer DeShane.
I do appreciate paragraph 22, which defines the unusual hardship that we asked Attorney Kushel to define for us. And this was something this board spoke to several times, that we do not want these licenses flipped after they're purchased and promises made, and then it's flipped to another owner who has no such obligation to this board or the community to fulfill those obligations and promises made by the previous permit holder. So just to go over this, once the permit is issued, essentially the operating permit or the occupancy permit to open the store, at that point a 3-year clock will start before they can sell or transfer the license. Is that correct?
Yes, it's the majority. There's still the clause that allows them to have really small investments made, but by and large, the transfer of the license to another entity will be restricted for 3 years.
And reading through these A through H, it doesn't appear a drop in the price of marijuana is a valid reason for calling a hardship, but rather seldom a distinctive characteristics of a university. The language is a bit legalistic here, but I'm assuming you wrote this because this is what he would have to defend in court.
This is, I think what I can say is that this is a limited area of case law, and based on the definitions that do exist through liquor control and a couple of cases that are out there about quote unquote a undue hardship, this is what they settled on as a defensible position.
I'm confident you and he came up with the best language we could have here. So I have no other comments. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm finding some confusion in my organization. Would someone repeat the motion for my benefit?
You repeat them. Repeat it? No, I'm off it. No, Supervisor, one moment.
I'm happy to if you'd like me to. I have it in front of me.
I think I have the right one.
Page 170.
Yeah. Which ones?
Page 170.
Yep.
All right. I move to adopt the resolution approving for introduction text amendment 2023-02, an ordinance amending the code of the Charter Township of Meridian, Ingham County, to rename Chapter 40, repeal Article 3 or Chapter 40, and adding Article 4 to Chapter 40, which authorizes and permits recreational marijuana establishments.
Okay, thank you. We need a roll call vote.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Next is item 12D, ordinance 2023-03, medical marijuana licensing update for introduction. Mr. Schmidt?
Madam Supervisor, thank you very much. This is, I would argue, the easiest of the three, because we pretty much knew how we needed to change this one to work better. Having gone through the required second Tuesday in January window twice now, staff had very strong thoughts as to how to fix this ordinance. Largely what we've done here is align the licensing process and procedure with the recreational. Just the consistency is going to be better for all of us as we move forward. Again, this piece of the industry is changing dramatically. All of this work may be for naught, to be completely frank, but this will make it at least somewhat consistent with recreational and make it easier on all of us going forward. And so staff would recommend approval of this ordinance as well.
Okay. Treasurer DeShane?
I move to adopt the resolution approving for introduction text amendment 2023-03, an ordinance amending the code of the Charter Township Meridian, Ingham County to amend Chapter 40, Article 2, commercial medical marijuana facilities.
Support.
Support with trustee Wazinski. Mr. DeShane?
Thank you, Dr. Schmidt, for your work on this. I think the board made it clear to you that we did not want to have 10 facilities, 5 recreational and 5 medical. Our intent was that we would end up with 5 at most, and they would provide both recreational and medical. And this ordinance is the best attempt we can make at limiting them in that way. Is that correct?
Correct. I think that my staff and the township attorney will be more than shocked if you have someone try to open a standalone medical facility in addition to a recreational facility.
I supported medical marijuana in 2019. I think it is medicinal for many cancer patients and others who need those properties of marijuana. And this board voted 7-0 for that back in 2019. So medical marijuana has never been a contentious issue before this board. For those reasons, I'll obviously support this. Thank you.
Trustee Wazinski?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I have nothing other to add.
Nothing to add? Any further comments? Clerk Guthrie, a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you all very much.
We now move to item 12E, Zoning Board of Appeals appointment. In Meridian Township, the Zoning Board of Appeals is the 5-member body with typically 2 alternates. It currently has no active alternates, and so I am offering the name of Anthony Bennett as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term ending 12/31/2024. Mr. DeShane.
Thank you. I move to approve the appointment made by Supervisor Jackson of Anthony Bennett as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term ending 12/31/2024.
Support.
Supported by trustee Wilson. Mr. DeShane, you have comments?
I think between the supervisor and I, we are close to a decade of ZBA experience, maybe more with her years on there. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a very important board, and it's the zoning, it's a chance for residents or businesses that are turned down in their zoning application to come before the board, a board of citizens, and make their case for it. This is my second stint on it, and it's actually gotten a lot better. We simplified the procedures. We meet once a month, and we saw a lot of sign questions before. As Trustee Lindsay knows as well, we're seeing fewer of the signs, and with the new sign ordinance, we'll probably see even less. It looks like we've got an applicant here. I do not know him personally, but he might be new to government service, and that is excellent. Sometimes we get applicants here who have PhDs and are all but Nobel laureates here in the township. This is someone at the other end of the experience spectrum, and I'm sure he'll learn a lot and be an excellent member on the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Further comments?
Voice vote.
Voice vote? All in favor of the motion to support the appointment of Anthony Bennett as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term ending 12/31/2024? Please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed, no. Chair votes yes. Motion passes. Item 12F is a grant application for Maximo Park accessibility improvements via a Spark grant application. Director Maisner is not here tonight. Mr. Walsh has consented to present this for her.
Yes, Director Maisner is busy right now, 24/7, preparing for Celebrate Meridian. So she has far more important things to do this evening, so I am offered to step in there. Yes, this is a grant that we applied for last year. It's to add playground equipment to the Nancy Moore Park and the connection trail that goes with it. The estimated cost is around $800,000. I will in full transparency, tell you this Spark grant, the aim of this is our American Rescue Plan funds that are being administered by the DNR. The aim of this, if you look at the recipients for the first year, the aim is for incomes, for communities of need. So we went ahead and applied before, and we're trying to see if we can't maybe hit the mark this time, but it's a request for $800,000 through this fund.
Okay.
Either way.
Let's hear from Trustee Wilson.
Well, thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to support the attached resolution of support to submit an application to the Federal Spark Grant Program administered by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for playground replacement and construction of an accessible paved loop trail in Nancy Moore Park in the amount of $800,000. There is no local match required for this program.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Hendrickson. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I do understand from Manager Walsh that it may be a long shot, but I'm always a big believer in going for grant funds, especially for kids, and why not try for it? So that's the reason I'll be supporting it.
And Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Yep, and you miss all the shots you don't take. So while we may not be the likeliest community to receive this, I think we should be applying for every grant that we can. It's in our taxpayers' best interest, especially when there's no local match involved. So obviously, I think we need to support this application for grant funding for this purpose.
Okay. Anyone else? I would just highlight the fact that the goals for this particular application have to do not only with replacing old and outdated playground equipment, but to increase the accessibility of this facility for both children and others who visit this park. I think I read somewhere in here that this is the most visited park in the township.
For kids, yes.
Kids.
Yep.
Shall we have a roll call vote? Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Let's see, who's next? Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
If I may?
Mr. Walsh, yes.
Yeah. I believe the next item on the agenda, is the deficit elimination plan. And before Director Garber comes up here, as you know, as I've informed you of today, Director Garber is leaving the township after 1 year of service. That may seem like a short tenure to some, and perhaps it is. But the impact that she's had on the organization is far beyond 1 year. I mean, let's rewind the tape and go back to remember where we were 1 year ago. In transition would not be probably a good overview of where we were at. There's probably terms for which I can't use in front of the TV tonight, but very, very helpful at a very difficult time for us. I know some of you were in here actually helping with the audit and stuff. We were in really bad shape a year ago when she came in, and she's taken us into a new level, and a new level that we hope with her departure, unfortunately with departure, that we can continue and we don't lose stride in what we've done. So I just wanted to publicly thank her for her work, and we'll miss having her around. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So item 12G is approval of deficit elimination plan resolution. Finance Director Garber.
Thank you. So as discussed at the last board meeting, the township reported a deficit of $41,184 in its American Rescue Plan Act fund in the December 22 financial statements. This deficit is more of an accounting deficit versus an actual deficit due to some expenditures that were prepaid for the upcoming fiscal years. And those amounts of the prepaids have to be classified as non-spendable fund balance. So it's not unassigned or unrestricted that can be spent on anything. So that's why there's a deficit showing in that fund. Based on that, the state of Michigan requires that we file a deficit elimination plan. And that's attached in the resolution based on the amount of the prepaid that will be coming off in 2023 and how well we're doing with interest income. I believe we'll be able to eliminate that in 2023. So this is just a 1 year plan, and we'll be back in the positive with this. Based on the letter we received from the state, they require a response within 30 days, so we need to file our deficit elimination plan by July 3rd. Happy to answer any questions.
Just in time. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to approve the deficit elimination plan resolution.
Support. Treasurer DeShane supports. Trustee Wilson.
I will just echo what Director Garber said, that this is it's basically a reclassification, isn't it, of $41,000 because of prepaids. So to me, this is more of a ministerial type of activity, and of course I will support it.
Mr. DeShane.
Just to clarify, we did not overspend our American Rescue funds by $41,184.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Roll call?
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. And thank you for your service to Meridian Township.
Thank you.
Item 12H is to do with the BWL Board of Commissioners appointment. So if I might read some of this, the Board of Water and Light has notified the township that a seat on their advisory board takes effect on July 1, 2023. The seat is rotated amongst Meridian Township, Delhi Township, DeWitt Township, and Lansing Township. Meridian Township held a one-year seat on the board in 2015 and 2019. It's time for us to make another appointment to this board. In 2015 and 2019, this position was held for this board by Mr. Mike Froh. And Mike Froh decided to not go for another bite at this apple, but suggested a friend of his and neighbor, Brian Pilar, from the Ward Cliff Neighborhood Association for this BWL Advisory Commission. I met Mr. Pilar. He is a 5+ year resident of Meridian Township. He is active in the Ward Cliff Neighborhood Association, and he is excited and interested in taking this position. So I'm looking for a motion. Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to appoint Brian Pilar to the Board of Water and Light Board of Commissioners for the term July 1, 2023 to June 30th, 2024.
Seconded by Trustee Sunderland. Comments?
No, thank you for that introduction, though, Supervisor. And I do have one comment, just for Mr. Pilar and our individual that was just appointed to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Just a great big thank you yet again from our board to our residents. These commissions are really important, and they do require time and effort. So I just really want to appreciate everybody that does sit on these boards and commissions for us.
Other comments? Okay. The motion is to appoint Brian Pilar to the Board of Water and Light. I'm not real clear about whether this is the Board of Commissioners. We might need to check that. For the term of July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes. And the motion passes. We now move to our board discussion items. Item 13A. It's another one of the juicy ones we've been waiting for Mr. Schmidt to talk to us about. Redevelopment Ready Communities Recertification Updates. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. In conjunction with Director Clark, and we've frankly gotten a lot of support from other departments as well, we're really close to having this wrapped up. There's functionally two things that I want to bring up to you this evening. I'll start with the easier one, which is number 4. It's on the second page of my memo. Director Clark has done an excellent job, along with multiple other department heads. Michelle Prince, Manager Walsh's executive assistant, intern Will Christie, actually, I believe was part of this as well, of trying to consolidate all these pieces of board and commission orientation and training and expectations and ethics and all this into a document. Director Clark roughly outlined that on the second page of the memo. We believe we'll have that. We're working through final edits on that, and we'll bring that forward for discussion and hopefully adoption by the board in the very near future. The bigger piece that I know everyone was very worried about last time that we did a better job, hopefully this time, explaining, is the housing diversity piece. And so just to be clear, the MEDC doesn't, they will readily say they do not care how we do it, just that we do it. So they're not at all saying everything has to be allowed everywhere. They're not directing what we do. They want a local solution. And so this is, in my 2 years here, this appears to be the local solution for us. So let me walk through it real quick with you. First and foremost, we have a public hearing requirement for site plans in our ordinance. It's not required by state law. I'm not aware of any other community doing this. And this is like something that is permitted by right, meets all ordinances. We still have to hold a public hearing and subsequently delay that project for 45-ish days. We're recommending that be struck from the ordinance. The MEDC also agrees. That is one thing that they will say you need to do. Is if it's a by right use, you shouldn't have a site. There should be no public hearing requirement. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to better utilize our website going forward here. This is the kind of thing that in modern society, I can very easily get a one-pager up on our website with the plans of the project, and it's going to see more people than, in the case of, Sierra Ridge would be a great example. For the fifth phase, if I had to do a site plan for that, I would notify 3 people: Consumers Energy, Meridian Township, and the IDE Company, because those are the properties adjacent. So this kind of public hearing serves no great purpose in modern society when we have access to every piece of information of all time. So we're going to do a better job on our website after that. The second piece really gets, the second one, the next 4 really get into the meat on the bones here. One of the things that many communities are getting to is getting rid of the idea of a minimum house or minimum unit size that can be built. Frankly, it's driven by the market. 2, not many people really want a tiny home. The people that really want a tiny home are like pot committed to a tiny home. The other thing that we have going for us in Meridian Township is you have a lot of lots around the lake and around specifically the watershed neighborhood that are very small lots that would be very difficult to build the minimum house size on some of those lots. And so I think really to encourage some reinvestment, it makes sense at this point to get rid of those minimum house sizes. It doesn't have a negative impact on the surrounding properties. That has been proven over the years through assessing data, because it's new construction then. It's still a new house, and it's still X square feet, and it's still valued based off that square footage. Their taxes are lower because they have less house to be taxed upon. That's what happens, and that's the thing people see. And by and large, I don't anticipate a huge hue and cry for this either. It's a limited market that this would serve, but it is a market. I can also see it happening in Tower Gardens in some area, that you have some smaller lots where a smaller house would be more appropriate. The third item, the multifamily uses should be permitted in multifamily districts. Again, this is what the district is for. There are limited places where it's zoned that way. It's not like we're rezoning the entire, I can count on one hand the number of properties that are currently vacant and zoned multifamily, because I believe the answer is 1. And so this is the kind of thing that you've already gone through the rezoning, you've already gone through the public process, you've already got a ton of input. There's going to be an SUP involved still. Again, there's no reason to not make that a permitted use if it's in the right zoning district. The fourth item is something that Director Clark pointed out. In the CIA, it is required by state law that you permit residential uses on upper floors of commercial buildings. So how staff anticipates this going is it's functionally a bridge between your large-scale MUPD projects and what's there now. So what this is functionally, if someone comes in and, not to use Tom's Party Store as an example, but that's what popped in my head because it's right by my house. If someone wanted to tear down Tom's and build a new building, 1 floor of apartments would be permitted. So that second floor would be permitted by right. And that's what you want to see in these revitalized corridors from a planning perspective, is more bedrooms, because then that leads to more commercial opportunity to fill in the space on the first floor. And so if you went beyond that, that would trigger MUPUD requirements, that would trigger SUP requirements, but 1 floor would be by right, in the CIA only. And the last item is something that, in researching this has actually come up previously in Meridian Township, and I'm not sure why it didn't go anywhere. The Planning Commission had a goal to do this about a decade ago, it looks like. But accessory dwelling units, it's a question that we get very regularly. It's a question that I'm dealing with right now in a house. And it has become substantially more popular since the pandemic. More and more people are looking to have multi-generational housing on the same property. More and more people are aging in their homes, and their children are having a harder time getting back into the community that they grew up in. And so either the children are taking the main house, and the parents are moving out to a new purpose-built accessory dwelling, or the children are moving above the garage and the parents are staying in the house and getting help maintaining it. I'll be honest, this is the reason you don't have a draft ordinance in the packet, because I'm still trying to tweak this one to make sure it ticks all our boxes. There's a lot of, as I've found, there's a lot of model language out there, but not a lot of places have actually had a lot of implementation in it. So people are starting to allow it, but homeowners are dipping their toes in slowly. And so, what we anticipate is something along the lines of, the property still has to be owner occupied, like the actual deed owner has to live in one of the 2 units. There'd be a limitation on the size of the accessory dwelling units, similar to our current accessory building standards. And, probably some architectural standard that, sets it up so that this unit is similar in character to the rest of the neighborhood. Because time and time again, you can tell when something is out of place, obviously, but there are great examples of these having been done throughout the country where I wouldn't know it was there, other than the fact that my brain knows that is a second floor, window that's set up as an escape window, or I know that's a set of stairs that's going above the garage because there's a firewall right there, things like that. The average person's not gonna notice these things. And I will also point out, we technically do have a very limited allowance for this currently in our ordinance. We allow domestic employees to stay in a second unit on a property. That's the only legal exception right now in our ordinance. So we think these five things will resolve, number 2, the housing diversity standard. And then Director Clark has really gotten to where number 4, the boards and commission standards will be resolved. And the remainder of our status, if you look starting on page 3, and I'm happy to go through them, but we're almost there on all of them. The master plan draft is getting ready to come out. The only reason it's not out is because I had a crazy idea of how to format it, and communications then told me I was crazy, and we had to circle back and start over on format, but it's basically written. The economic development plan is basically done. The implementation of the zoning ordinance will come after the master plan. So, and the digital permitting is right on the cusp. So we have almost all of this. We just wanted to make sure that from specifically the housing and the board and commission question, that there are no major concerns with this approach. And I'm hoping to have my draft back at the next meeting for you to refer to the planning commission. And I believe Director Clark is planning on having her draft of the boards and commissions piece back for discussion and adoption. So I've talked enough tonight. I'd be happy to be quiet now and answer any questions if need be.
Board members. Mr. Duchesne.
Thank you, Director Schmidt, for bringing this to us. When this came up almost a year ago, I thought, we're done with the MEDC now, because they're trying to tie our hands. They're trying to make us do everything everywhere, which doesn't fit this community at all. And I like their flexibility and what you brought to us tonight, the ways that we can meet their requirements. And also with the diverse housing options that we're going to be considering, such as no minimum size for the house, so it can fit on very small lots, multiple family uses. The one that I'm probably the most excited about is the accessory dwelling unit. And it's happening right now in a lot of big cities where they have huge housing crises. We have a housing crisis here. We have an affordability crisis. Our township does not have affordable housing. And these accessory dwelling units and these smaller lots may go a long ways towards that. So I appreciate your creativity in bringing this to us, and I'm excited about looking at the ordinance when you do. Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
You see all over the country the use of ADUs. It's a very progressive way at looking at housing challenges, and I've been a big proponent for a long time, so I think it's wonderful that we're beginning to think more creatively about how we can accommodate different living situations, because life is much more different than it was, especially since the pandemic. So this is exciting to see, and thank you very much for bringing it to us.
Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I agree. I think this is very creative, and you guys did a great job of putting this together. Just one question, Director Schmidt. So with the, what do we call them? Accessory dwelling units, can we clarify those are permanent structures, correct?
Yes. So, you know, there are some out there right now. So my predecessor and I both came to a similar conclusion of how to sort of, kind of, not really, but sort of allow this as like a man cave or a she shed type thing. Functionally, under the Michigan Building Code, or Michigan Residential Code in this case, if you don't put a cooking device in there, it is not a unit. So there are a couple out there now that you don't know about because they've been built over the years and people have used them as clubhouses for their kids. Or I've got one where the husband needed a first floor bedroom, and the easiest way to do it was through the patio out to the garage, and they converted the garage. So I think what this is going to do is make it very clear as to what the standards are and make it so that it's more easily achievable for people.
So just to clarify, not so much for me, but for the public, these would not be travel trailers or tents or... Okay.
Nope. No, ma'am. This is a permanent structure built to Michigan Residential Code standards.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Specifically without cooking units or with cooking units?
So I think what will happen going forward, they'll be permitted. Currently, there are a couple out there that do not have cooking units in them because that gets them around the idea that it's a second unit.
Okay, so that's a part of our decision-making, whether or not an ADU specifically will or will not have a cooking unit.
Certainly, staff will be recommending that we allow it. Because that's, I think, their purpose in establishing this ordinance is to actually put standards in place for this secondary, the pool house that's actually livable kind of thing.
Okay. Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I think this is a really good creative solution to what we thought might have been a daunting problem just a few months ago. So thank you, Director Schmidt and Director Clark, for your hard work on this. I am also interested and excited to see some of the progress for the Corridor Improvement Authority area, allowing the second floor residential by right. I know that there may yet be a stigma around the notion of form-based code, but one of the tenets of that, as it was drafted a couple of years ago, was to allow for residential atop the commercial in those areas as well. And I think it'll be nice to see if we move forward with this sort of proof of concept that might be something that the community is interested in as well. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but we may see some additional residential options being available where we may not have expected them. And I think that's a good thing too.
It actually occurs to me that downtown Okemos already has buildings like that
Absolutely.
and has had more of them.
Absolutely.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Isn't there a lot of interest with tiny homes being placed on existing properties already? Aren't there a lot of people that do that, and it has all of the same capabilities and it hooks up to the main house? How do you separate that from a structure, or is there no separation? The size doesn't matter.
So there's a couple of different pieces to this. There is the idea of a tiny house, which is actually a structure and it's attached to the ground and it's hooked up to water and sewer. And that is something that would end up being permitted going forward. I can tell you I've never gotten that question here. I've only gotten that question once in my career, and it was on a very oddball piece of property in Howell that someone was trying to figure out how to develop it. So I think that speaking personally for a moment, I think the idea of a tiny house is most people love, and then they talk to their spouse and realize that there's no chance you're ever going to get a tiny house.
That's happened to me.
Yes, as well. The second piece of this is the idea of the mobile units. They're tiny houses that if you needed to, you could pick them up and move them. That's a completely different thing, and that's something that if we want to go down that road as part of the RV ordinance clarification that I need to do at some point, we can have that conversation then, because that functionally is more closer to a recreational vehicle because it moves. So this would be focused on things that actually have a foundation in the ground.
Okay. And then are there not, I mean, I know of some properties in the township where the secondary property in the back is used as a rental. Is that part of this?
I'm only aware of one or two of those in the township, because typically you're not allowed to have two units on the same lot. There are a couple of them out there that historically have existed. And so I think that's one of the questions going forward. I think what we're going to recommend, whether that unit is rented out or not, the owner has to live on the property. And so whether it's the owner
So if there's a
down.
secondary unit on that same property, the owner is like in front or back and they.
Yeah.
Okay.
That both structures cannot be a rental on the same property. That's where the current draft that I'm working on is headed towards.
Okay. So that's the draft ordinance. That's not necessarily part of this.
Yeah, I haven't been able to finish that piece of it yet, and so that's what you'll see at the next meeting most likely.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that also mean that one owner, there's one owner for 2 units?
Yes, so the owner you would have your lot.
You cannot sell the second one separately or? Okay.
Correct.
Question. Other questions? Comments? Well, sounds like it looks good and we're in favor so far.
We'll be back with details here shortly so we can get this wrapped up by November.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 13B, Community Senior Center Task Force Report. And that will be given to us, shared with us by Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So we set 3 goals for this, primary goals for this board in really 2023, actually in the fall before. And those were to have better communications with our constituents, to finish the MSU Lake Lansing pathway, and also to explore the concept of a senior center, community center kind of idea. So in January, you gave us the request to move forward with looking at what we might do here in the township. We're one of the very few communities in the area that does not have a community center. And we also felt that our senior center, which is currently located in a middle school, Chippewa Middle School, that is going to be demolished in about 7 years, needs some kind of a future also. So it made some sense to put together a community center community center incorporating a senior center. So we took this task on in early February. The members of the task force were myself, I chaired this committee. Our vice chair was our supervisor. We had Treasurer Phil DeShane also on, and Manager Walsh, Planning Director Tim Schmidt, Parks and Recreation Director Luann Maisner, and Meridian Senior Center Director Sherry Wisdom. So we got to work immediately, and I want to thank all those folks for all the effort that they put into this. We met bi-weekly for 3.5 months and looked at 3 specific things that we were tasked with: finding a location, determining what the amenities of this would be, and a funding source. And the funding source proved to be the most formidable thing that we found. So the first thing we did is talked about how it should be in a central location. Such a facility should be equally accessible to all members of our community. So we looked at the mall first, and there was just not a suitable piece of property within the mall. And there were some additional challenges because we could only lease a portion of the mall. We could not purchase it. And we would have to have access to the mall from the center, which caused some concern about security issues. So we did have a couple of meetings with mall representatives and decided that was not the most feasible option. We then looked to the municipal complex here. Was there any space we could redevelop here? And the challenge was parking more than anything else. There just is nowhere that we could support a huge influx of cars coming in every day. So then we looked at a property that the township owns between the central fire station and the post office. And it's 4 acres. And we decided to do a wetlands delineation to make sure that that was upland and available. It's an ideal location because it's on the south side of Central Park Drive. We could have a bus stop there for folks who do not independently drive. We could have plenty of parking and potentially a drive that would go behind the post office and go out to Mall Ring Road, where there could be additional parking available if there were a large event. We didn't want to work in a vacuum reinventing the wheel, so we decided to make some visits to other community centers in other communities that we had heard about. The first visit was to Portage Senior Center, which was a really beautiful state-of-the-art facility, about 40,000 square feet, seniors only. It had parking all the way around it and the kind of amenities you would like to see. It was expensive to build, and it would be really prohibitively expensive to do something like that, and it only addressed the senior community. We went over to East Lansing and took a look at their senior center, which is incorporated in their community center, which is a retrofit of an old high school, which had all kinds of challenges because the rooms were segregated away. There was no way to get community space. There were some challenges with how they did their funding and how the seniors had to pay to use the community center facilities. It was just not workable. And then we went to this jewel, the Osceola Township Community Center that is in just north of Howell. And we were dazzled. And I want to direct you to the pictures that we have. This center was built and opened in June of 2021. That's the front facade in the first picture that I gave you. This is the entranceway that is next to it. The next 2 pictures are of the warming kitchen that they have off of an auditorium. So they have a very large space. And while we were there were 70 seniors getting ready for senior yoga, chair yoga, with an instructor. And the room was not full. And they had 70 people in there on chairs. So that was impressive. We knew that kind of space was necessary. If you continue down, there's a picture of the sink in the kitchen. And then there were a couple of pictures of the gym. The gym was gorgeous, full of light. There were 4 pickleball games going on at the time that we were there. They're making plans to have 6 pickleball courts available. It's also multi-purpose, used for volleyball and basketball. And the best thing is, in the slide right next to a shot of the windows over the gym, are these rolls of vinyl flooring. And what they do is they roll out the vinyl flooring when they have other activities where where shoes are being worn, street shoes. And what they use this building for then is voting for 6 precincts. They have a warming center. They use it as that. They use it as a cooling center, and they use it as an emergency center. And so they just roll out this vinyl. They don't ruin their beautiful floors in the gym. I was really impressed. And that's the kind of facility I think we're looking at, is a multi-use type of facility. There was a gym on the second floor. I showed you the bank of lockers that were in the women's locker room. And they shared with us some challenges they had with a flat roof building that with drainage. So there's just a picture of how they manage the drainage. And then their HVAC units. What we learned there is they made some mistakes. And so they built the building for just under $8 million during 2021 and opened, I'm sorry, in 20 and 21, and then opened in June of 21, 2 years ago. But they undersized the HVAC. They have some issues with baffling sound in certain areas. There were things that they learned in the process of doing this that were great object lessons in what we could do better. So their budget in opening this building was, in June of 2021, was just under $8 million. So we believe that we could bring this project in for between $10 and $12 million in present value. So then we looked to the funding. So we have location, we looked at the amenities that we would like to see in such a building, how we could multi-purpose it, how we could rent it out for private events and have a revenue source. But the funding was really problematic because we looked to legislative funding. We looked to millage dollars. We have a couple of millages that are going to be ending in the next 2 years. But we have to think not only about the capital improvement, the Capitol building itself, but also the operation of such a facility. And if you want to be open fairly long hours, that is where the money is spent because it has to do with getting staff there. So we believed that this is a start. This is our concept of what we would like to see. I put in the amenities that we really thought about, but funding was the biggest challenge. We did reach out to a potential major donor in the community who said that it was not the right time. And that's the conclusion we're reaching right now. We do believe that this is something that our community would benefit from. It's just not in the cards right now. We have to identify viable funding sources. We have the other pieces available to us. So that is our report, and I thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions.
Questions? Board members, Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor, and thank you to Trustee Wilson and the other members of the board and the committee, the task force, I guess I should say, for the hard work that you guys have put in over the last several months. This is something that I was really passionate about and was very pleased to see included in our top 3 township goals for this year. And I certainly can see the efforts that were put in this report and in some of the intermediary, information I heard back about these site visits. I think that as I read this, the conclusion that I come to reading this report is we have a problem, right? The senior center, as we know it today, may not be there in 7 years. And so this may not be something that we can move on today. It may not be something that we can move on tomorrow. But we have a ticking clock, and we have the opportunity of knowing in advance when that clock will chime. And I think it's incredibly important that we continue forward in some way toward seeing that. This would be a major addition, a major asset to add to the township. And it's just a matter of figuring out how. I think that the 2 things that you outlined in the report as recommendations for moving forward are very good. Because while we can certainly learn the lessons that others have learned by visiting and talking to them and hearing from them, ultimately, we need to be able to provide a service, provide an amenity to the township that they want, right? A set of activities or space that is something that they are asking for, that they want and that they need. And so I love the idea of at least adding this into our community survey that we do, or even having it, separate conversations about specifically this in the next couple of months to a year, in an attempt to gain community understanding of what it is that they want and need. And then take a hard look at what funding sources are currently available, will become available, what sorts of things that we can tap into to see this through to becoming a reality. You mentioned the upcoming millages, which is great for the residents of the township who will see a decrease in their tax liability over the next couple of years. But we do have an obligation to continue to be a prime community, to continue to offer those services. And so would they support, keeping the same level of taxation with the addition of additional services and benefits? That's a question I think that we should pose. And then the last thing that I would suggest adding to our list of three things to move forward, once we've conducted a community-wide survey, would be to put together a design rendering of this. We did allocate $200,000 to this task force, and it sounds like frugal and fiduciaries of the township resources, you didn't spend much of anything on it, which is wonderful. But I'm a firm believer in if you see it, you can achieve it. And I think that this will become a far more exciting prospect for our residents once we've received their input and can show them a picture and a design of what we think the vision of this might be. And so I would respectfully request that we add this to our recommendations so that we can, better position ourselves so that we can deliver something in 7 years when we know this senior center will be gone.
Or sooner.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Great suggestion.
Trustee Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'm absolutely impressed. This is probably one of the bigger projects, yet the least amount of time that you've brought something to the board so quickly. So I just want to say that I really love all the idea. I love the work that you put into it. I would support Trustee Hendrickson's idea of a rendering, because again, if we're going to ask for funding from our residents, we can get them as excited as we are, right? You've been talking it for a long time, Trustee Wilson. I do have one question, and I briefly, a while ago, talked to Supervisor Jackson about this, but the location. Can you just tell me a little bit more about why we aren't considering the Nokomis Center anymore?
Yes, I can. The Nokomis Center has a lease in perpetuity. And so it has an unusual circumstance associated with it. Nokomis is looking for additional classrooms, additional space. So one of the things we considered was a build out of a larger building that incorporated the Nokomis Center. But the ultimate deal breaker on that is there's insufficient parking on this parcel. There's about 50 parking spaces over by Nokomis right now. There's not much land given the constraints of the historic village. And where we have parking today, to have 70 or 100 cars there on a daily basis. The Osceola Township facility, for instance, has 180 parking places. So we know if there's high usage, which if we build the right kind of facility, we'll have a lot of usage, as demonstrated to us. Where are those people going to park? We have definite land constraints over there. So ultimately, that was the decision. It was not a good parcel for that reason.
those reasons. It looks like it's a very large parcel, that's why I
sure
asked. That's why I asked. And then just, redevelopment as opposed to new development is my question too. So I appreciate you looking into that, explaining that. Thank you.
Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I too would like to thank the task force for their time that they spent on this and researching it, and especially Trustee Wilson for, I can't imagine the amount of time that you put into this report and putting this together. I think this is helping enormously guide us into making sound decisions for the future for providing a center, a multi-use facility for our community members that meets the objectives and the goals of the future land use section of the master plan, meets the zoning objectives for everything that we talk about in regards to, important factors to consider in what we're providing to our community members, as Trustee Hendrickson pointed out, including, provisions for recreational opportunities for our members. And I know there was extensive research to make sure that what this center provides didn't conflict with what the MAC and Court 1 and the Y provides as well, because of course we want to support those businesses in the township. I do want to, and I know you mentioned the Osceola had precincts in there. It has become increasingly more difficult to find precinct space. And with the requirements of, 9 days early voting and having to have 6 precincts and finding space where to put voters, since, that's the position that I hold here in the township, having that as part of the consideration for where we can't have it in this room, we can't have it at the fire station community room, the mall would be great. Having that thought process, or maybe asking for input in regards to the amount of space that's needed for something like that as part of this as we move forward, I'd be happy to provide information that, that the task force could use as part of a consideration for a multi-use facility. And again, just thank you so much for presenting all the work that you all did on this and presenting this.
This was definitely a group effort, so I thank everyone who did participate and all of our wonderful partners that helped us out through this process. Thank you.
Mr. DeShane.
As a task force member, I want to thank Chair Wilson for her leadership on the task force and the excellent report that summarized our work. From the beginning, funding was discussed because these buildings aren't just dropped in at no cost. We knew it would be a multi-million, $10 million or more expense. And so from the beginning, we went after the major funding sources, providing at least half of the funding. That didn't pan out yet. So at that point, we decided it's time to wrap this up for now, produce the report to the board, and hopefully at some point in the future, we will identify other potential funding sources. All that's to say, we never thought, well, we just need to pass a millage. A 1 mil increase would generate over $2 million a year. But if we put that before the voters today, I can guarantee you that would go down. Because our residents we're first of all, we're the third highest taxed community in the region already, behind 2 cities, East Lansing and Lansing. And with inflation, all tax bills are going up 5%, which is a significant increase. And this year's inflation, finally, we got a good inflation number last week of 2%. Hopefully, inflation is coming down, will level off. 4%. Hopefully, it'll come down further to 2%. We'll end up with an annual inflation factor of 3% rather than 5% next year. But until we get through this inflationary period, our voters are going to be very sensitive to any increase, and we be able to roll back the Catherwell millage as well as the fire station debt my suggestion would be we return that to the voters. Say, we were able to reduce your taxes. That would be very popular with our voters. And then look at this funding sources separately from that. I think if we try and say, well, we're going to take away 0.4 mils of these two combined, but we're going to tax you for this new senior center, it gets confusing. Let's give them the tax rollback that we're going to work for to get, if we can make that happen. And then look at the senior center as a separate project that we sell that is accepted and embraced by the community or not. We don't know yet. I think you got to look at it that 40 years ago, if you said to this township, we're going to have 20 parks and over 1,000 acres of land preservation, would you support that? They would have said, no, that's way too much. But now try and take away any of those parks or sell those land preservation, they would be up in arms. So it's a concept that once this community center is here, there's enough support to generate in the first place, it will be an essential part of the community. It will allow for seniors and youth and other groups to meet. It will be very much used and appreciated by the community. But we're a long ways from there right now. But this is a really good first start. I was glad to be part of the task force.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. And Trustee Wilson, for your report.
Thank you.
Of a good idea, on a good idea. Unless there's more, we'll move to item 13C. And this is an idea coming from Manager Walsh. It involves the possibility of a 2017 and 2019 millage audit. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor and Board. I'll be brief. I'm actually going to pivot a little bit this evening because what I know tonight is different than what I knew Friday when I published this memo. So with the vacancy that we're going to have in the finance office, I'm not sure this is the right time to move forward with this because we're going to struggle enough because this timing of with our budget season just starting in July and the search for a new director and then coupling with this. The idea was that we made, and it's still, I think it's a relative idea that the board may want to consider in 3 or 4 months. But the thought behind this is in 2017, we spent a whole summer, lots of evenings, making promises about the police and fire millage, and we were going to do this, this, and this. We're going to make this much towards pension. We're going to hire these people, and we're going to do this every year. And you can count on us and trust us. And then in 2019, we came and said, we want in 2017 it was 1.483 mils. In 2019 it was about 1.96 mils for the roads. And we said it's all going to go on local roads, and we're not going to reduce down the amount that we currently put in. We're going to continue to do everything we do, and we're not going to reduce any general fund contributions. In fact, we've increased our general fund contribution. And going back to 2017, what's really important is that we said we are not going to put these payments in to the main fund, because if you put the additional funds into the main fund, your required contribution will go down and we would pay less. We said we're going to put these funds into a separate fund, let them grow, but not let them affect the ARC, the actual required contribution. And by doing that, our contribution has gone up. That's exactly what we said. We've done everything that we said we were going to do. The thought is that these are multi-million-dollar promises that were made by the boards in 2017 and 2019 and the staff and administration. And the thought just occurred to me that is it time, 6 years later after the police and fire millage and 4 years after the road millage, is it time to audit ourselves? Hire an auditor who has no ties to the township. We would not use our current auditor, but it's going to take some work by the finance office. For me to come up with all the numbers would be highly inappropriate because these numbers should come from the finance office. So I'm going to just pivot, if you don't mind, tonight and just say we need to step back on this. I'm very interested to hear whether you even want to do this tonight. When I say we should pivot, I'm not even sure the board thinks this is a good idea. So if it's something you want to move forward with, if you decide policy-wise that you want to do this, I would only ask that we have a little bit of delay before we start. Of course, if you say start it right away, we'll find a way to do it. But I do think it's something we should consider. and putting a message out to the taxpayers about what we said we were going to do and what we've actually done. And I leave that up to you to give me direction on how you want to proceed. Thank you.
Board members, do you have comments? Mrs. John? Trustee Wilson?
It is not the right time.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I think this is an excellent idea. I think that trying to do this while facing a staffing shortage in the finance office is not the best idea, and will only lead to overtaxing those that remain. And so I think, for me, I would suggest going forward with this at a time frame that is deemed appropriate by the manager, where it's not going to overburden remaining finance staff.
Trustee Wazinski?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One question, Manager Walsh. So, given the information you just, I'm not the finance folks on the board, so I appreciate their questions and.
She's just to your right.
Well, there's two other fiduciaries.
She's the auditor.
Yeah. So you just explained that the plan that was developed is doing very well. And we're increasing our funds while, not taxing. Why do you think an audit is valuable? Given, is it just to ensure what we're doing is accurate and correct, or moving forward, does it give us more information about maybe future, future decisions?
Good question. Probably the central question, right? The reason I think it's important is because I and others back in 2017 and I and others back in 2019 made very specific promises along with the board about what we were going to do. And there's some very specific things in there about not shuffling money and moving money around, and because there's a lot of things that can be done between the general fund and new millage money and all that. I think an auditor ought to look at what we said we were going to do. Here's the minutes of the meetings. Here's what we said we were going to do. Here's the pamphlets that we handed out to the public, and please follow the money. Go back to 2017 and follow the money, and follow the money from 2019, and devise a report that the board can share with the public. Here's what we said we were going to do. Here's an audited return on what we actually did. I think it's relevant. It's a lot of money, and we made a lot of promises.
Excellent, that's helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I guess I was under the assumption that the auditors that we currently have, that's part of the work that they do. And if it's not part of the work that they do, is this something that we could ask the auditors to do next year when we go to contract them, when we do our annual audit? Is this like additional work that they can do to follow that money trail as you stated? I don't know. I'm not the finance person either.
It's a good question, but no, is the answer, because they wouldn't be aware. Like, our auditors could look like, okay, we didn't move money we decided to move less money from the general fund because we're a little low to roads this year. We just reduced it. They'd look at it and say, okay, well, they moved 100,000 from roads. They did 280 the year before. They've done 280. This year they did 100. That's their prerogative. They can move what they want. The auditors aren't privy to all the commitments that were made before. If we put the $1.5 million extra that we put into MERS, if we put that into the fund instead of a surplus fund, as long as the $1.5 million is here and it shows it went in here, they're going to say, okay, they put the $1.5 million in here. It's up to them where they want to put it. They don't know all the nuances that.
And that's not something we could contract with the annual auditors for additional work that we ask them to do.
Excuse me, it would be cost prohibitive to do that, to give them a bunch of things to look for. I'm thinking it's a one-time, because it's been 6 years and 4 years, it'd be a one-time audit that we would do going back 6 years and 4 years. We wouldn't need to do it every year. We just need to go back and review what we said. And there's way too many nuances of this many officers and this many firefighters and all of that.
Okay, so knowing that, then I concur with Trustee Hendrickson's comments about doing it in the future and looking at it at a later time and putting it off for now. So I appreciate you bringing this forward to us.
Mr. DeShane.
I agree with the others that have spoken. This is an excellent idea. I'm glad you brought it to us. I don't think it's the right time to do it either, but I think you'll know when it is right to bring back to the board. I think you're getting a sense that the board likes the idea. It's really an important accountability tool for us. It's to say to someone independently, this board put before you 2 millages. The police and fire millage has collected $18 million since it's been 6 years at the end of this year. About $3 million a year we collect in that. And then the road millage is at the end of this year, we'll have collected over $16 million. So a total of over $34 million has been collected. It's good to have a focus of audit. Just the $34 million hasn't been spent as it should have been spent. We've got nothing to hide. We've got a great message to tell them we're using every dollar towards these goals. But let's have an independent auditor verify that. And to Trustee Wazinski's question about doesn't our MERS report tell us? It's also tied, that's also tied to the stock market. So you could have great years in the stock market, and we're not putting enough in, and it looks great. But then when the market goes down, it looks even worse if we haven't met our goals. And by then, it could be way past the date in which we could have corrected it. There's nothing to correct here. I see these numbers, and the auditor sees them, the manager sees them, the finance director sees them. We're putting the money in. That's just have an independent verification at a time that would be less onerous for the finance office. Yeah. But thanks for bringing this before us. It's a good accountability tool.
You're welcome. And just, if I may, just update you on the recruitment. We posted the position in a number of places today, the MML, the MGFOA, LinkedIn, and a couple of other sites. And the salary range is 104 to 122. And we're looking for a CPA, but not required. But certainly someone with BS&A experience and municipal financing experience is required. But the CPA is optional. We hope to find someone. I was in negotiations. I was in conversations several times with a candidate this weekend that we're actively recruiting. So we'll see where that goes. But there's a 2-week window. There'll be an interview process and all of that. So that's kind of where we're at on the replacement.
Okay. We're also looking for a election administrator, deputy sheriff? Deputy.
Oh, yeah. Deputy sheriff.
Deputy sheriff.
We're going to be working together.
That's called the short straw. Yeah. Election administrator.
Election administrator.
Yes.
Is the position we're looking for.
Yes, we certainly are. And that pay range has been increased. Some difficult discussions were held, and I think the clerk made some very valid points. When you take a look at, I'm not election knowledgeable on elections at all. She's to my right. But we need to do something with the salary that we were offering based on current conditions, but also the election changes that are coming next year. So we did bump that salary significantly. We know that another community adjacent to us, and also Trustee Hendrickson has been invaluable in these discussions and very helpful in the last couple of weeks. We actually sat down and talked about all this. So it's good to have the experts that we have amongst us, because not one person certainly knows it all. So we are looking for an election administrator as well.
Clerk Guthrie?
I just have one additional, just as a matter of procedure. Do we need to table this so it doesn't come back as an action item at the next meeting? Do we need to do any official
not on,
Action, okay.
it's not on the table.
I want to make sure it's correct in my minutes for Zach tomorrow.
I'll have, when we get settled in here, hopefully in the next couple of months, it needs to, the budget season starts in about 3 weeks.
Right.
So, once we get settled in and get ahead, I'll have conversations with Supervisor Jackson when she's comfortable putting it back on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate all your comments.
I do have one question relative to that. So, when I first read and heard something about this, I didn't know about the new challenge with the office of the finance office. And the first question that came to my mind is, why do this now? Why? So in a simple finance mind like mine, halfway through the millage each millage might be a good time to do that. But, did you have some other reason that said now might have been the time under different circumstances to do this?
No, there was no other ulterior motive to it or anything like that. It was just an idea that occurred to me when I was out walking one evening and thinking about all the money that we're spending. And I remember, it was a nice summer evening, and I was thinking about the summer evenings we spent every night going to these, and then Trustee Opsimer was involved in these things. So I just was thinking about all the meetings we had, and John Scott, I remember John Scott Craig hosted one and all that. I was thinking, we've made a lot of promises back then, but we've never talked about it since then. And why don't we come out and audit and make sure we've done what we said we're going to do? So there was really no other reason than it's just an idea that popped in my mind.
Okay. I think what we kind of came to was, it's a great idea. We should do it sooner as circumstances allow, and that we trust you to decide when and how to bring the idea back to the board.
I appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much. And Trustee Wilson, great report.
Oh, yes. So, item 14 on our agenda is comments from the public. He doesn't count.
You can comment. He's still a member.
Would you like to comment?
Oh, okay.
I don't think he counts as public, though, at this point. He's been here too long. Item 15, other matters and board member comments. Are there any? Then I believe we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.